When reviewing the never-ending parade of top 100 lists and online reviews of the best games of all time, there's one game that stands out and is often mentioned in the same breath as Final Fantasy VII and The Legend of Zelda. That game is the venerable classic Chrono Trigger. As the industry began to usher in 3D and the new 32-bit console revolution began to emerge, Squaresoft released Chrono Trigger as a memorable storybook ending to the great console RPGs of the 16-bit era. While this was essentially a swan song for Square in the 16-bit and Nintendo era, it still remains one of the most emotionally resonant and intricately beautiful games ever produced. Developed by Square and a dream team of staff and creators, Chrono Trigger not only pushed the envelope of the Super Nintendo's capabilities through use of a 32-meg cartridge, but it also introduced gameplay elements and plot devices that would be found in later RPGs for generations to come. Final Fantasy creator and veteran Hironobu Sakaguchi acted as executive producer and supervisor of the game, along with Yuji Horii, the man made famous for the legendary Dragon Quest series. It was a landmark collaboration of the best that Squaresoft and Enix could offer, long before the eventual merger of the two companies. While Horii introduced the basic story structure of the game, the project also boasted the talents of Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu and character designer Akira Toriyama. While Uematsu came aboard in what was originally an advisory and supporting role, he later helped in composing many tracks of the extensive soundtrack. Much of the game's ambiance and memorable atmosphere is credit to the artwork of Akira Toriyama, who lent his familiar style ingrained in the Japanese pop culture psyche with his contributions to Dragon Ball Z. But most of all, necessary of any good RPG that sticks with the player for years to come, Chrono Trigger has scantily clad midget women. No, actually what's most important is setting the mood for the scantily clad fighting ladies. This is the soundtrack. Chrono Trigger does not disappoint. While Nobuo Uematsu and his influences can be heard throughout the score, most of the credit must be given to Yasunori Mitsuda, whose score is so expansive that the soundtrack was released as a 3-disc set in Japan. Though being Mitsuda's first job as a principal composer, it happens to be one of the most extensive in RPG history. The varying elements and settings of Chrono Trigger are captured with great effectiveness by the rookie composer, a feat not to be taken lightly considering the many settings and timeframes in which this game occurs. These very settings and timeframes bring us to the story of Chrono Trigger. This game still inspires discussion and references as anyone would have for an old film. Just as common as one would recall a favorite movie quote or scene, a hardcore gamer may say, "Remember when Frog was revealed to be the legendary hero who was called upon to defeat Magus?" Chrono Trigger, from the mind of Yuji Horii, is an adventure that spans many different time periods, intertwining the destinies and motives of the game's 7 main characters. Chrono, the game's protagonist, begins the game in what can be considered the present, 1000 AD, in the Kingdom of Guardia, just as the celebration of the new millennium kicks off. This story element did not go unnoticed, as it was a fitting homage to the real world preparing for the dawn of a new era. Not only a new era of video games as new consoles were coming, but also to the world of 1995 as everyone had already begun counting down the arrival of the 21st century. The plot follows an interwoven storyline of ancestry, evolution, and time travel plot points that, while more complex than even Back to the Future Part 2, they manage to be quite clearly portrayed through unprecedented character development. Each of your playable characters has complex histories and stories that introduce not only motivations for their actions, but also their feelings on why life is important regardless of the time period they live in. The game follows the characters Chrono, Luca, and Marle from 1000 AD, Frog from 600 AD, Robo from 2300 AD, Isla from 65 million BC, and Magus from 12,000 BC. Along with these playable characters are many more memorable people and places that help flesh out the main goal that unravels as these adventurers attempt to correct the elements disturbed in the timeline. As the story progresses, our team learns of the events that take place in the year 1999, the day of Lavos. Lavos, an extraterrestrial life form believed to have been living dormant under the Earth for millions of years, emerges that fateful day for reasons only later to be discovered. The gaggle of time-traveling friends decides then and there that it is their duty to save the world from destruction and correct the course of history for the good of humanity. It's quite an ambitious task which takes Chrono through the varying time periods of his world. The majestic and fairy tale world of 600 AD, the more modern 1000 AD with slight elements of a burgeoning industrial revolution, the prehistoric 65 million BC and the primitive race of humans battling the evolved reptites, the cold, harsh reality of the Dark Ages in 12,000 BC, and the dystopian wasteland that is 2300 AD. The world falls apart in 1999 and all life and evolutionary progress halts, keeping the world in a state of chaos and continuing destruction. These time travelers also come upon the end of time, a gateway to all time periods and a black hole in space and time held in order by the Guru of Time, a wise old man holding guard to the many pathways available. This mentor of sorts holds an almost existential insight and dominance over time's influence over the events and destinies of our main characters. The collective genius of Square and Enix together provided the dream team of legendary game makers, who watched those on the front line of development. Chrono Trigger was produced by Kazuhiko Aoki and directed by Takashi Tokita, Yoshinori Kitase, and Ahiko Matsui. While the main story elements are developed by Yuji Horii, the general outline was developed by Masato Kato, and directors Kitase and Tokita helped develop the many side quests and story elements that would make Chrono Trigger an original contribution to the RPG genre and video games as a whole. Stay tuned for Retroware TV's continuing in-depth look at the brilliance of Chrono Trigger as we delve into the presentation and gameplay elements that make this game a shining example of the 16-bit era. We will look at why Chrono Trigger will live on as one of the greatest games of all time and how it continues to be a benchmark for all future RPG and adventure video games.